taking a stand against false religion. Taking a stand against false religion. And just saying those words is extremely countercultural, because the idea that there is false religion or bad religion cuts against the grain of the way we have been trained to think about religious belief. I was sharing this in my Christian Ed class this morning. We're going through 1 John. And I shared the idea that in today's cultural setting, there is a far more subtle and successful stab at the Christian faith than there used to be. There are vocal atheists, but they've never been a significant number, and they've really never been a significant voice. The approach today is not to say the Christian faith is untrue. That has a certain measure of success, but it's not the most successful strategy. The approach today, orchestrated, and I say this with intent, orchestrated by the spirit of the age, is not to say Christianity isn't true or you shouldn't be a Christian. Because we are still at a place in our society where there be enough of a residue of Christian belief that people would push back against that. The strategy today is to say all religions are true and all religions are good. And so whether you're talking about Judaism or Islam, sure, we all say, so there's ISIS and there's radical Islamists. People don't understand Islam. That's my basic conviction. And Hinduism and Christianity, and you take these religions, and once you say they're all good and they're all helpful, well, intelligent people, without anybody saying it, intelligent people are going to look at it and say, okay, you've got monotheistic religions where there is one God in solitaire. The Christian faith, where you have the Trinity, one God, three persons. Hinduism, where you have millions of deities, and the reason, don't kid yourself, the reason Hinduism is on the rise in the world today is because it has a very easy task of assimilating other religions because of its view of gods and multiple deities. And so Hinduism by nature appeals to people because it looks like it's the most tolerant, because it can easily just absorb all sorts of religious beliefs in a way Christianity can't and shouldn't. And so when people say, look, there's all these religions and they're all, we should just embrace them all. Each is its own way and approach to what people conceive of as God, and they're good people and sincere people and peaceful people and loving people trying to find their way to the top of the mountain and to find communion with their God. And people who have expressions of those religions, we even call them people of faith. It doesn't matter what your faith is in. It's just the process of belief. And so Christians have their faith, and Muslims have their faith, and Hindus have their faith, and Jews have their faith. But as society gets sharper and more educated and starts to look at this, they're going to say, wait a minute. If these religions over here say there's one God solitaire alone, and if this group says there's one God in three persons, and this group says there's millions of different gods, well, and I'm speaking now as a non-believing observer, I might say, well, they could all be false, but there's no way in the world they can all be true, because they proclaim radically different things. And so, without saying a word, what happens is our society comes to treat all religious expression as just something that benefits the person who holds those particular religious beliefs. It doesn't matter whether it's true or not. It's true for you. How nice. And so what happens in our society is Christianity just gets lumped into the cart, and believe whatever you want. After all, religion isn't like math. You can hold your own beliefs, and this person holds their own. And in doing it, what we've done is we've treated all religion like a baby's pacifier. It helps people. And we respect their views. And of course, in that kind of a climate, Christianity just dies of neglect. And after a while, even people who hold to the Christian faith start, and I hear it all the time, I hear pastors who will say to me, you know what, we just don't need to be exporting the Christian gospel to other places in the world where they already have their own religion and believe it as passionately as we do. And I just want to go, are you kidding me? Now, all that preamble, just kind of hold it in your head, because it has an awful lot to do with the long text that I'm going to read and the study we're going to have tonight. All right? Okay. Taking a stand against false religion. Let me just, it's a lot of text, but you won't get the story unless I read it. So just don't fall asleep. That's all I'm saying. Just listen. Daniel 3. King Nebuchadnezzar made an image of gold whose height was 60 cubits, breadth 6 cubits. He set it up on the plain of Dura, the province of Babylon. Then King Nebuchadnezzar sent together the satraps, the prefects, the governors, the counselors, treasurers, justices, the magistrates, and all the officials of the province to come to the dedication of the image that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. So this is a big occasion. It is estimated there's probably 500,000 people gathered on the plains of Dura. Okay, just think of that. So we're not talking a tiny thing. Think of a crowd the size of 8 Super Bowls. Okay? Or 350 Grey Cups. Then the satraps and prefects and governors and counselors, the treasurers, justices, magistrates, and all the officials of the provinces gathered together for the dedication of the image that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. And they stood before the image that Nebuchadnezzar has set up. And the herald proclaimed aloud, "You are commanded, O peoples, nations, languages, that when you hear the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, bagpipe, and every kind of music, you are to fall down and worship the golden image that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. And whoever does not fall down and worship shall immediately be cast into a burning, fiery furnace." Therefore, as soon as all the peoples heard the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, bagpipe, and every kind of music, all the peoples, nations, and languages fell down and worshipped the golden image that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. And therefore at that time certain Chaldeans came forward and maliciously accused the Jews. They declared to King Nebuchadnezzar, "O king, live forever. You, O king, have made a decree that every man who hears the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, does he have to list every instrument every time? And every kind of music shall fall down and worship the golden image, and whoever does not fall down and worship shall be cast into the burning fiery furnace. There are certain Jews whom you have appointed over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Mechach, and Abed-nego." We had a study where we looked at the changing of the names. Remember these young men that had been taken out of Babylon along with Daniel, out of Jerusalem along with Daniel. "These men, O king, pay no attention to you. They do not serve your gods or worship the golden image that you've set up." Nebuchadnezzar, in furious rage, commanded that Shadrach, Mechach, and Abed-nego be brought. So they brought these men before the king. Nebuchadnezzar answered and said to them, "Is it true, O Shadrach, Mechach, and Abed-nego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the golden image that I have set up?" Now, if you're ready to, when you hear the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, bagpipe, and every kind of music, to fall down and worship the image that I have made, well and good. If you do not worship, you shall immediately be cast into a burning fiery furnace. And this question, keep it in mind, and who is the God who will deliver you out of my hands? Now, I've been reading really fast, I know, but just pause there. Nebuchadnezzar has orchestrated the creation of this idol. He is behind this push of worship. He's a religious man in his own false religion. But he can't imagine a God who actually does anything. Do you see that? Who is the God that will deliver you out of my hands? He's not used to thinking of God in terms of a living God. He's used to thinking of God in terms of objects that the people worship, not gods who respond and work on behalf of the people. What kind of God, Nebuchadnezzar says, what kind of God are you counting on who's going to actually, in a living way, intervene and save you? Nebuchadnezzar can't imagine that kind of God. Y'all see it? All right. Who is the God? Last part of 15. Who will deliver you out of my hands? Shadrach, Mechach, and Abed-nego answered and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this matter. Remember that phrase. If this be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of your hand, O king. 18. But if not, be it known to you, O king, that we will not serve your gods or worship the golden image you have set up. And the question that I want to ask right there is, what is the good, what is the reason for worshiping a God who won't deliver you out of terrible circumstances? What is the reason to honor and glorify and serve a God who you faithfully obey and serve, but he doesn't work on your behalf? Is there still some good that can come out of that? And there's a whole book of the Bible, if I can just give you a clue, there's a whole book of the Bible that a lot of people wonder, why in the world is it in there? It's such a depressing book. And it starts off with Satan going to God saying, look at Job. And of course he serves you. And of course he honors you, because you've just blessed him everywhere he turns. He's rich, he's happy, he's healthy, he's prosperous. But if you take that from him, he has no reason whatsoever to honor you, and he won't. The whole book of Job isn't about the problem of evil, like a lot of people think. The whole book of Job is written to prove the motive for serving God is the greatness of God, not just the blessings that he gives. This is Shadrach, Mechach, and Abed-nego. If he delivers us, wonderful. If not, we won't bow anyway. We will serve our God. 19. Nebuchadnezzar was filled with fury, and the expression of his face was changed against Shadrach, Mechach, and Abed-nego. He ordered the furnace heated 7 times more than it was usually heated. And he ordered some of the mighty men of his army to bind Shadrach, Mechach, and Abed-nego, cast them into the burning fiery furnace. Then these men were bound in their cloaks, their tunics, their hats, their other garments, and they were thrown into the burning fiery furnace because the king's order was urgent. The furnace overheated. The flame of the fire killed those men who took up Shadrach, Mechach, and Abed-nego. The guys that threw them in died from the heat. And these 3 men, Shadrach, Mechach, and Abed-nego, fell bound into the burning fiery furnace. Then King Nebuchadnezzar was astonished, rose up in haste, declared to his counselors, "Didn't we cast 3 men bound into the fire?" And they answered the king, "True, O king." The king said, "But I see 4 men unbound walking in the midst of the fire, and they are not hurt. The appearance of the 4th is like the sons of the gods." Then Nebuchadnezzar came near the door of the burning fiery furnace. He declared, "Shadrach, Mechach, and Abed-nego, servants of the Most High God, come out and come here." I guess. Shadrach, Mechach, and Abed-nego came out of the fire, just walked out. The satraps, the prefects, the governors, the king's counselors gathered together and saw that the fire had not any power over their bodies of those men. The hair of their heads was not singed. Their cloaks were not harmed. The smell of the fire and no smell of the fire had come upon them. Nebuchadnezzar answered and said, "Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Mechach, and Abed-nego, who has sent his angel and delivered his servants, who trusted him, and set aside the king's command and yielded up their bodies rather than serve and worship any god except their own." So somehow in this, God ends up getting glory. Therefore I make a decree, any people, nation, language that speaks anything against the God of Shadrach, Mechach, and Abed-nego shall be torn limb from limb. This is the man that said, if you don't bow before my image, you'll be thrown into the fire. Now he says, if anyone bows before any god but the true God, he shall be torn limb from limb. Sounds like he's converted. He's not. He's impressed, is what he is. For there is no other God able to rescue in this way. And then the king promoted Shadrach, Mechach, and Abed-nego in the province of Babylon. It's easy when you're studying Daniel and today, Shadrach, Mechach, and Abed-nego, it's easy to miss just slightly the actual situation that they faced. And the reason we need to start out this study the way I did, talking about false religions and the Christian stand against false religion, is because that's the particular kind of pressure and the kind of temptation that they faced and the kind we will soon face. The exact situation in which Daniel and Shadrach, Mechach, and Abed-nego had to take their stand is the very one you and I are in greatest danger of facing very shortly in our own Christian experience. Daniel wasn't being lured into sexual promiscuity. He wasn't asked to indulge in drinking and drugs and pornography. Now, all of the characteristics of his character that we studied in this series so far, they would have application in those settings. But we need to stop and look at the nature of the pressure that was being applied to Daniel and his friends. And what I want to say is important because even Christians don't like hearing it quite as much anymore. But the issue for Daniel, and in this text, Shadrach, Mechach, and Abed-nego, wasn't the test of moral purity. The kind of pressure they were coming under was a religious pressure. Point number one. These men are trying to embrace one religion while their society is trying to encourage another. That's in 1 to 5. I won't take the time to read it all again. The idol is set up. The people are to worship the idol. So the issue for these men, Shadrach, Mechach, and Abed-nego, is a religious issue. The issue, as Daniel records it, apparently Daniel records the account, was the issue of who they worshipped and how they worshipped. They were trying to remain true to the God of their youth, the God who was their creator, and the pressure was on them to embrace foreign religion, new religion, different religion. I'm simply saying this is going to be the new battle in our land for Christians. You can believe in God, you can go to church, but increasingly you know the pressure, the religious pressure of the day. You know how you are made to feel like somehow you are intolerant, narrow-minded, or heaven forbid, some kind of a redneck fundamentalist if you don't strive to see the good in all faiths and somehow admit that each in his or her own way is trying to find their approach to God. That's where Daniel's at. He's not asked. Please notice, he's not asked, they're not asked to renounce the God of their youth. They're simply asked to go along with this as well. There's nothing in here that says they can't hold to their own beliefs, but there's this image, and we all bow to this image, so you're here, you fit in with us. The tone of the day, of the culture in which they were held captive, was how can I put it? Was against their exclusive attachment to their God. And their view, however noble it looks in Sunday school stories, their devotion to their God, Shadrach, Mechach, and Abed-nego, it was hated by the people around them. Theirs were not religious convictions of the society. Society was not willing to accept their beliefs. So, whatever else you forget or remember about Daniel and Shadrach, Mechach, and Abed-nego, never forget that what landed him in the lion's den and them in the fiery furnace wasn't political convictions or sexual deviations or the mishandling of the king's money. Daniel's in that lion's den, and they're in the fiery furnace because of their tenaciously held religious beliefs. Or more specifically, Daniel's in that lion's den, and they're in that fiery furnace because of their refusal to modify their beliefs by adapting them in a way that the culture would find acceptable. I can't tell you how important I think this is right now, and how important I think it's going to be for the church in the next 10 years. Because increasingly, the Christian faith is looked at and lumped in, as I said before, with a host of other belief systems as a kind of a personal therapy rather than a divinely revealed body of objective, real, historic truth. And so the important matter just becomes, what does your religion do for you, rather than is what you believe actually true? If this religion works for you, then fine, I'm happy for you. This is the one that works for me. Religion becomes each person's psychology, the individual's own worldview. Let me tell you how it manifests itself sometimes right in the church. I've had people in this church, not often, but occasionally, say to me, Pastor Don, why do we quibble so much over doctrine? I just believe in love and truth and unity and wholeness. Why do we have to quibble about doctrinal matters? And it breaks my heart that so many people don't even see that in God's eyes that kind of thinking is so utterly wicked. When you read the New Testament, the Apostle Paul writes how he contended for the faith once delivered. Look up the verb contend in a dictionary sometime. It means fight. Every single New Testament author except one died for the content of his faith. Right from the beginning, conversion to Christ, genuine conversion, always carried with it the following proof or experience. One of the great texts is 1 Thessalonians 1, 9 and 10. Is that in your notes? Is it printed in there? Let's read it aloud together, all right? Read with me. For they themselves report concerning us the kind of reception we had among you, and how you turned to God from idols, to serve the living and true God, and to wait for his Son from heaven, whom he raised from the dead, Jesus, who delivers us from the wrath to come. It's all there, man. It's all there. The proof of anyone truly encountering Jesus, the proof that anyone has a living relationship with him, Paul says it was found in the turning away from idols. That was the first thing. You're welcome to follow Jesus, but you can't bring your idols with you. Now, we use that text to tell people to turn away from all sorts of idols in their hearts. Money, houses, jobs, cars, relationships, etc. And that's true. That's true. Jesus taught all of that clearly himself. But those aren't the idols Paul was writing about. He was talking about actual idols, the kind Nebuchadnezzar built. Paul is talking about the gods that these people worshipped devoutly in their religions, the gods they bowed down to, the gods they offered sacrifices to, the gods they said their prayers to with hopes of pleasing him and getting forgiveness and blessing, the gods their parents taught them to worship, and the gods everybody else worshipped. Those gods, Paul says, if you want to follow Jesus, you leave them all behind. I don't know that we tell people that very much. Until you destroy all the idols, you can't follow the Lord. Nebuchadnezzar is just a classic example. There are several places in the book, I referred to one of them, where it looks like Nebuchadnezzar almost gets saved. In Daniel 2:46 and 47, then King Nebuchadnezzar fell upon his face, paid homage to Daniel, and commanded that an offering and incense be offered up to him. The king answered and said to Daniel, truly, your God is the God of gods, the Lord of kings, the revealer of mysteries, for you have been able to reveal this mystery. He's just so impressed when Daniel comes and tells him both his dream and the interpretation of the dream. Nebuchadnezzar can't believe it. He's in awe. Wow, you're God. Later on, of course, he's going to build that idol. Nebuchadnezzar is going to want everybody to bow to it. But he's impressed. In this third chapter, 29, therefore I make a decree, any people, nation, language that speaks anything against the God of Shadrach, Mechach, and Abed-nego shall be torn limb from limb, and their houses laid to ruins. There's no God who is able to rescue in this way. Look at Nebuchadnezzar, and you will see a phenomena that's repeated over and over in today's church. You'll see a man who was overwhelmed at something he saw God do. A man who was taken up with demonstrations of God's might and power, who became just emotionally charged at the displays of God's glory, who praised God for those things, but never did tear down that idol on the plain of Dura. So by all means, remember Daniel in the lion's den. Remember these three men, Shadrach, Mechach, and Abed-nego, in the fiery furnace, but never forget while they're there. Nebuchadnezzar says to Daniel and to Shadrach, Mechach, and Abed-nego, your religion is unacceptable. And that's where these men all refuse to budge. Okay, point number 2. If you're going to remain true to Christ, you will always have to resist the pressure of the crowd. We took more time on that first point, so don't panic. You'll always have to resist the pressure of the crowd. I'm looking at verses 6 and 7 of chapter 3. Whoever does not fall down and worship shall immediately be cast into a burning fiery furnace. Therefore, and it's the corporate nature of this, the public nature of this. As soon as all the peoples heard the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, bagpipe, and every kind of music, all the peoples, nations, languages fell down and worshipped the golden image King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. There's a different kind of pressure here. Earlier in the first chapter, Daniel wrestles with dietary changes and his devotional life. There are private pressures brought to bear, but not a lot of people see it, and Daniel still remains true. In this third chapter, the pressure is different. We see the test of public declaration, not just private devotion. This whole test of bowing to this image, all the peoples, all the nations, all the languages. It's designed to be intensely public. You stand out. I said earlier, historians estimate that there would be about 500,000 people assembled on the plain of Dura. And you can cut the tenseness in the air with a knife. The instruments begin to play, and everybody, 500,000 strong, everybody knows what they're expected to do. The music starts, and a sea of people at the same time bow before the idol. And you wonder what happened. I mean, so here they all come, and they all They're all bowing. Were there some kids somewhere, do you think, that, psst, look. And there's 3 of them. Shadrach, Mechach, and Abed-nego. And suddenly people start to turn around. And out of 500,000 people, out of the close to the population of Calgary, there's 3 people still standing. Let me tell you, you stick out. So what do? Do you pretend to tie your shoelace while everybody's bowed? Do you hide beside somebody really big in front of you? Do you play the tolerance card and sort of rationalize and say, well, I'm never going to reach these people if I offend their religious and cultural traditions, so I have to fit in for the sake of the gospel? Or do you just stand there and say, no, sir, and take your lumps? Nothing makes cowards of the best of us like the pressure of the crowd. It is the hardest place to stand. What if we aren't accepted? What if they don't like our beliefs? What if I lose my job? What if we're persecuted? It can come, people, believe me. All over the globe, Christians are being persecuted for not bowing to other gods. Wake up. If you don't think it's ever going to come here, wake up. The Bible says in Proverbs 29:25, the fear of man lays a snare, but whoever trusts in the Lord is safe. Stick that on your fridge. The fear of man lays a snare, but whoever trusts in the Lord is safe. We're not going to bow. Our God is able to deliver us. And even if he doesn't, we're still not going to bow. Just, there, God. You trust in the Lord. Ever see an animal caught in a snare? He's in there because he didn't see the snare. He didn't see the danger coming. Everything seemed fine, but now he's in a situation where he can't get out. He can't escape. He's lost the one thing he values the most. He's lost his freedom. That's, according to Proverbs, that's what the fear of man, the pull of the crowd, will do to you. Make no mistake. The plan of the enemy isn't just to have everybody bow. The plan is to ensure success by making certain everyone sees everyone else and whether they bow or not. Because when everyone else is bowing, you're likely to fall in line. I don't know about you. When I look back on my life, I don't really have much of a misspent youth. I increasingly value it. I used to kind of be embarrassed about it. I've never, so many of the, I'm not saying these are the things that send people to hell. I'm simply saying things that I see messing up people's lives. Because of the way my folks raised me, I guess, I've pretty much been on the straight. I don't know what alcohol tastes like. I've never had a cigarette in my mouth. I don't go to movies where they swear much, let alone where there's anything dirtier than that. But when I look back on my life and see the things that I did that were stupid, I'm old enough now, I look back, and if I remember the things that I did that I really think were stupid, I did them with other people that were stupid. Anybody else know what I'm talking about? That's how it works. That is just how it works. The fear of man, the pull of the crowd, it's a snare. It's a snare. So there comes the immense pressure of that very public moment. Will these men do what everyone else expects them to do? Will they bow with the rest, or are they big enough to stand on their own? Point number 3. If you want to stand against the crowd, you must make a firm resolve, and you must make it quickly. We're almost done. Verses 15 to 18 are really important verses. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but if you jump in at 16, so verse 15 is a longer verse, and it just Nebuchadnezzar makes clear, here are the terms, here's what you have to do, and here are the consequences if you don't. Okay, so that's laid out. And then they respond in verse 16. Shadrach, Mechach, and Abed-nego answered and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this matter. What's that? We have no need to answer you in this matter. If this be so, our God, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of your hand, O king. But if not, be it known, O king, we will not serve your gods or worship the golden image you have set up. 16 is interesting. Different translations put it a little differently. The New Jerusalem Bible, that phrase, we have no need to answer you in this matter, in the last part of verse 16, the New Jerusalem Bible, your question hardly requires an answer. The Revised Standard Version, on which the ESV is based, we have no need to even answer you in this matter. The bottom line is the same. They're saying, there's nothing to talk about here. Our minds are made up. We don't need to dialogue. Nothing's going to change our view. There's such wisdom here. These young men, listen, these teenagers, that's what they are. Don't forget that. They're teenagers. God give us teenagers like this. They're not being cocky or arrogant. They know it's a serious situation. We know from the text that they already knew that this refusal to bow would cost them their lives. They know that. They aren't fooling around. What they're doing is planning for strength. They know that the best resistance to pressure by the crowd is a fast response. If you dilly-dally, you might waver. And so they don't give themselves a chance to second guess. They don't give themselves any room to back out. There's nothing to talk about here. We're done. They know they have absolutely nothing to gain by discussing different options. So many things could be rationalized. There's other points of view. Sin can always be made to look reasonable. If you are going to enter into a debate every time you're tempted, you're going to be losing spiritually all your life. Proverbs 1:10 says, my son, if sinners, now you got the crowd, if sinners entice you, so now you got other people pulling your life in a certain direction. My son, if sinners entice you, do not consent. I have an old book. My dad gave it to me years and years ago. It's very hard to find if you ever see a copy and it'd be used. I have an old commentary on Proverbs that I treasure. It was written by William Arnott, A-R-N-O-T, and it was written in 1839. It's a beautifully written book. And here's what he writes about that little verse, Proverbs 1:10. My son, if sinners entice you, do not consent. Now, here's what Arnott says about that verse. Just listen to this. This is worth coming to church for. It is not by debate or polite excuses that you can successfully repel enticements to sin. There is an adversary with whom you are not obliged to keep terms. Gather from this little scripture the attitude you should assume and the language you should hold. It's get thee behind me, Satan. Always remember that much depends on the round, sudden, blunt refusal. The unfaltering, undiluted, dignified no of the one who fears God more than the sneer of fools. Alas, many stumble merely from neglect of this simple principle. They intend to refuse. They do not want to go all the way into sin, but they try to resist it gently and politely. They may escape for a time, but someday their foot will be caught in that snare, and they will fall and stumble. That's just great, great wisdom. So here's these young people talking with the king, and even under the pressure of that big a crowd, the king starts in on his explanation. Here's what's going to happen. I'm warning you. And they just said, we got nothing to talk about. Either God will deliver us or he won't. We still have nothing to talk about. We're not going there. End of story. "45 more seconds. The last point. Pray for the best and stand firm even in the worst. 17 and 18. God's able to deliver us. Even if he doesn't, we still won't bow. Those are just wonderful, wonderful words of faith. Never put limits on God's power and on his love. Bring all situations to him with faith and high expectation, and make sure, like these men, that the God you are asking is the same God you're serving, the God whom we serve. Not just the one we talk about, right? The God whom we serve is able to deliver us. Even if he doesn't, we're not going to serve you. I'm not a Calvinist, but I have just about everything John Calvin ever wrote. And here's how he comments on that last verse. God's glory was of greater worth than 1,000 lives. And everyone said,